All right, we got some people joining in. Okay, let's get started. This is Analyzing ISOON with data science and magic. So I'm Joe Hall. I'm a hacker, I'm a shred enthusiast, and I'm an energy drink sommelier. I'm head of security services at Nile. I've worked in cybersecurity for almost 30 years, from threat intelligence to network security and firewalls to encryption with PGP. Been at this a long time. We hopped down the rabbit hole with this ISOON link and got with it. So here we go. Let's dive in. So who is ISOON? So two main founders, Wu Haibu, aka Shutdown, and Jesse Chen Cheng, aka Lengmo. That's Wu. That's Jesse. Both of these pictures were not easy to find. Wu's significantly easier. Jesse's, we ended up finding it in a blog that was deleted 4 years ago in his image store. By looking for the most common pictures that showed up in the image store, I was able to locate one of his earliest posts to his blog where he had taken a selfie with a brand new laptop he bought. As far as we know, this is the only image that anybody has of Jesse Chen. So enjoy. Do that what you will. So the ISOON leak was 47,000 lines of chat conversation, about 180 meg dump. So we decided to find an easier way for regular everyday users and threat intelligence specialists to go through this and to figure out what are in these documents, what makes it important. What is it fake? Are these real? So we dove into this. Google has been very helpful with their translate docs. So initially we started using Google's OCR for the images. Everything is in Chinese. So we had to figure out how do we translate that. So we use the OCR to translate some of the image docs. And then the larger data sets, we found there was a limitation where they stop you at 3,000. What we did find is if you use Google Sheets and you run that little formula, for example, that's Russian to English translation up in the top right that I typed in there. If you have a data field, you can use Google Translate in Sheets, and so far it does not limit you. I have also noticed that the pages don't cache, so it reruns that script every single time you open it up. Adobe Scan and OCR was also super helpful here. For example, that's the Hector instruction manual. That's their malware they deploy. It's a Trojan that infects a lot of network equipment. So who have they hacked? Take a deep breath for this one. All right, United Kingdom, the Home Office, HM Treasury, Department of International Development, Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Department of Education. List goes on and on. I'm not going to read all that. Never mind, there's too much. So all these countries they've attacked, they've dug on hard. The largest in this breach that we saw, they were targeting Kazakhstan, something on the Beeline Highway that Dave, my colleague, is going to jump into. Some more countries that they've attacked and different departments in there. These guys are network attackers. They like to go after cell phone networks. They like LANs, they like wireless, and they like hidden layer 2 persistence. More countries they've attacked and different organizations, human rights organizations. They're all over the place here, but they are targeting. We found that they like to find what the Chinese government is going after, what missions they're trying to do, and build payloads or packages that they can sell to them. So what are some of the things they built? A Twitter attack control system, Wi-Fi near field attack system, domestic criminal investigation system, an automatic pen testing platform, email analysis intelligence platform, a DDoS system, anti-gambling platform, and custom remote access Trojans. They also have an email encryption platform, a Twitter control forensics platform, Windows remote control management system, Mac remote management system, iOS remote control, Android remote control, Linux, Wi-Fi sensorless implementation device, attack countermeasures, Wi-Fi proximity attack system, a network traffic countermeasure system, automatic pen testing system, Wi-Fi terminal positioning countermeasures equipment, domestic public opinion tracking system, Falcon anti-gambling platform, practical training platform, Skywalker data query platform, that one's spooky, email analysis intelligent decision-making system, and the Noxud cloud intelligence analysis and decision-making platform. So their development history. These guys have been at this for over 20 years. These two both come, they're former Green Army for China, and they've built various weapon systems to attack anyone they're going after. ISOON, we have related them. They are part of Red Alpha. They're part of Red Hotel and Poison Cart. I've got some, let me, hold on. I need to pull up a little note on this. So I've got, I've got some other notes on this. I need to dig into that. But anyway, we'll just go into it this way. So the maps of these images, I've tried to locate them on Google Earth. I think they're scrubbed. These images came from Apollo Mackman from a CSET document from Georgetown University, where they had done a deep dive on this group. They didn't know exactly who they were yet, but they were piecing stuff together. If you look at this closely, so all of these locations on this map are different educational centers or testing centers. Again, this is $100 billion operation. It's been going on for 20 years. They have an $80 million fab up here in the top left that they made their own hardware. So they're making chips, they're making controllers, they're making little battery devices, and they have an entire ecosystem where they train people in a national cybersecurity school, raise them up in incubators, they give them startups, and then they fund those startups through the government to allow them to go and be weapons. So how do they pwn your LAN and Wi-Fi? One of their main things and tools, they have the individual soldier toolbox. So this doc is a screenshot from one of their, the actual toolbox, as well as their documents for them. We translated it from Chinese and English so you can read what a lot of these tools are. If you look, they've got wireless audit tools, data management, web shells, remote control, proxy tools, downloads, exploits, audits, LAN attacks. I mean, they're everywhere in this. They can capture and modify packets as they go through, and they have large infrastructure to support all of this. The Wi-Fi sensorless implementation device. So they have multiple attack vectors on your Wi-Fi network they can do, where they implant a Xiaomi battery. Looks just like right here, top left. So that little Xiaomi battery, inside of that is a chipset that's got Wi-Fi controllers, cell phone batteries. It will last for 20 hours with no power source attached to it. They could slip that anywhere inside of your network and it immediately starts attacking your Wi-Fi, establishes persistence, and then laterally moves their Trojan over your networks. They jump over layer 2 so that you can't see them, and they activate kernel exploits that they have in memory on the XRX platform and on various other network providers. The hardware for those sensors is below right here. The basic system is the little battery. The more proximity attack is that little mini version that's just the chip. If you look here, all the slides will be recorded. I'm posting the Zoom link as well. So we'll have all that for you. So you take pictures by all means, but if not, we've got them here for you. So the two systems work separately like this. One of the remote control platforms needs proximity equipment. So it needs access to your Wi-Fi, right? Sitting in there, it's going to get onto your, right inside of your domains. It's going to establish some persistence, and then it's going to jump laterally through your network before it makes a clear exit out of it, so that it makes it look like the attack is coming from who's ever become a victim. The other one is a physical attack section. Let me move this little window here. So you target physical area right here, that Wi-Fi proximity attack system where they embed a chip. They manufacture power strips that have chips with Wi-Fi radios in them and cell phone radios. The power strips also have battery backups in them. So if they're unplugged, they are still malicious. This device is called their anonymous anti-tracing flood wall. It looks like a little firewall. This thing deploys hundreds of relay nodes, adopting a random selection strategy, combining hundreds of thousands of communication paths, and updates selection every 5 minutes. They've built their own Tor network that jumps inside of networks that have been hacked by them. They have persistence inside of that networks, and this is a 100 gig network that they allow you to connect into in the cloud of all their vulnerable sites. When they jump into that site, when they hack you and they get persistence, they jump into a computer, they deploy their Trojan, and that Trojan will jump across their switches, avoiding firewalls and avoiding scanning. They look for devices like cameras, IoT devices, desk phones, things that are not running EDR where they can hide from you. When they exit your network, that's unencrypted traffic. So if they do nefarious stuff on your network, it looks like you did it. On a regular switch, when you go and sniff a port, you'll get MAC addresses from every device communicating on there. You'll get all sorts of garbage. You'll figure out where their Active Directory sits, where their DHP server sits, who's got their DNS, what other devices might be running on this network. You can passively sniff and grab stuff. On a real switch like the stuff we build, if you query or do a port scan on my device, you will get, see that little MAC address right there? Dead one. It does not respond back with a MAC address of any of the hosts on your network, so you cannot laterally move. On regular switches, besides the ones we manufacture, it will spill its guts. The layer 2 broadcast domain was built like BGP. A bunch of trusting network hippies from Santa Cruz trusted that everyone connecting to that network would behave. It's not like that anymore. We're not connected to just universities and militaries. The group's a mess. When you try and jump laterally across a network like the ones we make, the edge device, the firewall, gets handed that session. It gets notification of what's moving laterally on your network, on your switches, where previously every other manufacturer has a blind spot. That's what they're exploiting. That's how they get through this network. If you have the ability to protect against it, this is what it shows up like. It sees a host sweep. It sees it and drops it. Just like if you were plugged in directly to the firewall and the firewall could scan it, this spreads out through your network. So when they jump across that, this device also has countermeasures, and it's got dedicated anonymous leak for safe comms. They can inject TCP, SYN packets, UDP packets, ACK packets, IGMP, ICMP, DNS. They can jump inside of your cloud network and do this without detection. And they can inject packets in that stream to do malicious things with it. It's a giant network. Skywalker is one of their tools that's really concerning. It is able to take threat data, basic information queries, where you can run a query inside of that system with a phone number, an email address, username, target to be queried. It will spill out basic household information, everything about their social media profiles and identity. This is a stalker's, best dream. It's similar, the amount of device that inside of that data as well. When that data is queried, it looks for relational information, kind of like a product that launched with Heroic recently with Epic. So they can check and see inside of there, they've got the threat data that's been stolen dark web, usernames and passwords. They can see, okay, well, this username has been also used on these other websites. Is the password different? Yeah, the password's different. Or is the password the same, but the username's different, and all of a sudden these IP addresses match? They start building relation databases on that. This virtual identity query has backdoors into WeChat, Sina Weibo, Facebook, and Twitter. They can jump inside of Twitter and they can change posts that are visible to the Chinese population for any user on Twitter. So if Bill Gates says something that's pro-US, anti-China, they can change what he said that's visible to only people behind the Great Firewall of China. These are the guys that built that. One of their most prolific pieces of Trojan is called Hector. I love the meme, the little dinging bell. This is a wake-up call. It's coming for you. This malware has been out for multiple years. Right now, it's detected by 7 vendors. That's not enough. Multiple people have talked about this breach, but not a lot of people have noticed inside how they break into the network or what specific pieces. We've got a list of IOCs at the end of this talk. You're going to want to go through that. I also reference a lot of great talks that we've had from our colleagues. You'll want to click on those, check them out. So Hector is a remote control system. It supports HTTP socket, HTTPS WebSocket over TLS protocols and use reverse connections. The remote control system supports interactive shell command line, file management, and other functions. And it can breach Windows 2003, Windows 7, Windows 10, 2008, Windows 2012, 32 and 64-bit, and CentOS 5, 6, 7, Ubuntu 14, 16. When they generate their certificate to get access into this, they use Reptile 64 out. Their cert key, if you notice, is sitting right there. If you find these certificates on your network, they're in your network. Remove them. This is their hacker as a surface price sheet for somebody who wants to utilize their services. These are various exploits that go all the way from network hardware exploits into cell phone network exploits. They've got backdoors into all sorts of things, and this is a very powerful AP. I think they need to be their own APT group. Something wild that we discovered in digging through this. Their malware, the Chinese government is allowing them to patent it. And then other groups like C404 are currently suing them for using their patented software. That breaks international law. It's a huge problem. It's also ridiculous to see these other actors actually suing each other for services. They contract each other out for various attacks. Every year, the Chinese government organizes CTFs and cyber events where all of them get together and they plan their next missions. They operate as fake cybersecurity companies. Some of them set up companies like Q360, where they're already on an international SEC list for doing bad things and being a fake ass EDR company. What they'll do is they'll go and bid for a company's business, and then they hire one of these turds to go in and hack them while they're trying to sell them the business. It sounds like extortion. They're going in and they're holding these people. So Treadstone and WinNTI, we have made a connection between them. These all work together. This was their project. That's the end of my bit. Now it's Dave's turn. You want to give the stage over to him? Thanks for hearing me. Take care, man.
Hey everybody, I'm Dave Mitchell. Been doing this for a long time. Luckily, I've gotten to know Joe over the years and was fortunate enough to used to work with Jeff at Highest in our previous lives. And for somebody who's had a lot of time on their hands in recent history, this was a nice way to distract myself for a little bit. And I do apologize for the sheer amount of AI generated images in here. We didn't harm any GPUs, just a few cycles. So I like to try to look at ISOON from a little bit of a different angle, from the business structure angle as well. So Crunchbase I use quite a bit, just in, from an OSINT perspective. And when I went and looked at ISOON, it looked pretty straightforward, except for why would a founder be named Carlos Varela? I don't know a lot of Carlos Varelas in China. Wanted to look into what he was doing a little bit more. Carlos Varela is a really busy guy, according to Crunchbase. He's the main investor in Dell. You name it. Pretty much, he's one of the most popular guys on Crunchbase here. But I went and took his picture and went and did a reverse image search. Turns out he's a digital marketing guy in Puerto Rico who didn't know that he was representing the Chinese military at this point. So he's since been able to remove himself from Crunchbase at that point, which was probably not too fun for him at the end of the day. Another thing I thought was interesting was the investment structure. So when you look at like an angel round or a seed round, that was about $500,000, but the timing, and it was always 3, 10, and 20. in a pretty short time window. That on its own didn't really kind of strike me as crazy, except for the fact when you look at how many products they've been building too, this is less than 10 million US dollars. Pretty cost effective startup when you start looking at it that way. The interesting part about their investors, cash capital. No, it's not cash money. It's the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And then Kihu as well, which is still the largest EDR vendor in China. As Joe was saying, they're already on the naughty list with the US government and the UK government. And then Jin Sheng over here, he was their seed funder. He's also an investor. He was a startup investor in Peng Shui, which is a really pretty popular security service over there. Pointed out that these are Chinese military companies and probably shouldn't be investing across the board. Now, I thought that was interesting with the 31020 million RMB investments. Let's go run a query through Crunchbase and see if we can find anybody else that kind of fits that. Now, I haven't really tied anything together to make sure that this is potentially another Chinese military company, but as you can see, 31020 in a particular time window. And what they actually do is, big data science, analyzing telecom networks, different investors, but there's so many investors in China, it's hard to really know who's there. Pingdong is actually on their website. It says that they are a proud civilian plus military fusion center, as well as Beijing Jingwei is another military investment firm. Again, for less than $10 million, these are all the products that UA creates, just like ISOON, big data, IoT, LTE, you name it. They've got pretty much everything. So I think this is one way we can really start going back and looking at these companies in China, finding out who's invested in them. Are there any military applications across the board? Then we can start looking at other companies like UA, which does seem to appear very much like ISOON across the board. One thing that kind of worried me, across the board was, do we have any US money going to these places? And as you can see here, there was a ton of over 3 billion going to China over the last few years. But in 2023, that shrunk significantly once the US government stepped in. The largest VCs like GGV, Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, and place like that, they've all divested now. They have their own Asian holding companies so that they can do investment over there without necessarily violating the law. But this is something that we really probably need to pay attention to more when it comes from an investment standpoint. I also just wanted to go through the entire deck and try to find any IP and DNS markers. And there weren't a lot of indicators across the board. There was one in here that I thought was interesting. As somebody who fits in the 35 plus category at this point, they don't believe that we can use reverse proxies. So this is a middle-aged man who's in a tunnel, not a TLS tunnel. But that one IP address itself, obviously all 8s is good luck in China. But they were pretty frustrated with the older folks working there. This was from Will. He was able to tie these together with the actual threat groups that Joe spoke about. There really wasn't a lot of intel about the 8.218 IP address, but I was able to find that there was a supply chain attack that started back in 2022. And as you can see, the chat was June. Nobody noticed this until December. So this was probably being in use for, I would say, probably close to a year, where they were injecting things and compromising people through technical support channels, and then being able to read their Skype messages and Telegram and everything else in there. So that was pretty interesting just from the one IP address standpoint. Another one that just kind of stuck out, I'm like, what is Vaiwan here? To me, based on the text in the chat itself, it almost kind of looked like, here's an intranet site, here are some targets, I need you to prioritize 2 and 4. Not sure exactly, but I kept looking at what Vaiwan was, and there was a bunch of stuff on GitHub. It's essentially using ngrok, open up a port on your machine so you can test it out on the internet. I don't know how much they were using it across the board, if that was just for their intranet or whatnot, but this was a pretty popular application within DingTalk. They've since decommissioned it, and the domain's been parked for a while, but people are still doing DNS lookups across the board. It's a wildcard domain, so some of these are just, bots or whatnot doing DNS lookups, but there's still software out there trying to look this stuff up, but wanted to kind of go, where did it go? You can still see some MJJ lookups within here, just like in the chat log. So did they move it? Did it go somewhere else? Now there's nothing on the Ding Talk site anymore about ngrok. You know, they show the old decommissioned software, but I went back in history and I was like, let's find an older IP address in passive DNS and let's see what was hosted on that. And that's where I saw ngrok.dingtalk.com. So this was just, you know, developers were using it, but so was the military at that point. One thing that really stuck out to me here as a network engineer was just the scale of the mobile surveillance that was occurring. There were a few leaks. They were pretty much truncated based on a couple of different providers. Beeline, Tele2, which is a global provider. Beeline's Russian, but they've got Kazakh and other areas over there. They leaked pieces of these different types of records, and it's literally everything you need to be able to identify a person, who they're calling, their IMEI on their phone, where they are physically from a GPS position, along with actually the cell towers across the board. So this was just some of the stuff after we translated it of what data they had on people. The interesting part was most of the leaked data were all on Kazakhstan citizens. There's a big, obviously, everybody knows how much there's oppression going on over there. The Kazakh government's working with the Chinese as well in order to oppress the Uyghurs, being able to track them and see who they're calling and across the board. It's pretty concerning, which leads me to believe got to be some vulnerability points here. And it is a floating dumpster fire. This is just, I'm going to go through some of these slides pretty quickly, but when you started looking at the host posture of these telecoms, it wasn't like, how did they get in? It was, how did they not get in? It pretty much just across the board. Like, look at, I mean, these are 10-year-old plus CVEs on some of these devices, buffer overflows and Nginx. This is actually the part of Tele2 in Kazakhstan. These are all viable. I didn't test them, obviously, but when you've got that many CVEs, there's probably something wrong there. They still are telnetting to their network devices, so that's super handy as well. I mean, just the sheer number of CVEs was remarkable. Yeah, 272 unique CVEs just on Tele2 and Tele2 Kazakhstan. So it was pretty disappointing to see across the board. Beeline was just as bad. These are all very, remote code exploits that are sitting out there. I mean, it speaks for itself when you look at just how bad it is. It's like they're not even trying. And obviously, in certain cases, they're probably complicit. Yeah, this is their entitlement and metering for business services. Wouldn't be hard to pop in there. Anonymous FTP server with 12-plus-year-old hardware software on there. They had Prometheus stuff exposed, containers wide open, you name it. It wouldn't be hard. I would assume that not just the Chinese military is in these telecom networks. I would imagine most militaries are in these networks at this point. And so much room for activities because you could pretty much do whatever you want with these places. The scale, when I started taking the location-based records for the towers and mapping them out, really became kind of staggering when you look at this one organization of ISOON and just the scope of what they were able to do, even with the snippets of data that we had. Start to map it out. This was from the Beeline data from the location services, and it just goes up and down a main highway in Kazakhstan. Even though that was a pretty small set of data, you could just see how far it stretches right there. These are obviously places where, I mean, these are just normal civilians that they're looking at. These are not, looking at other military members. These are just people's houses and where they are in particular places. This is Tele2. They had a different kind of location data, different format, but still all worked. And then when you map it out, the scale of it's, I mean, that's all of Kazakhstan, and it even stretches into some other countries at this point. It was interesting that all of the leaks only showed the Kazakhstan data in there. I'm not sure if that was on purpose, but it was, I know for a fact that they're probably surveilling significantly larger sets of data. But when you look at it, it looks cold in Kazakhstan at this time of year, and They're watching people at the gas station and the supermarket. This is at the Almaty airport, so they can track people coming in and out. Somebody next to a school in the middle of, literally in the middle of nowhere. But then when you kind of zoom out, you start to kind of see just how big the actual landscape is of what they're surveilling. And again, this is just that snippet. I imagine it's probably all of Eastern Asia at this point, and probably down. I would assume it probably stretches, obviously, all the way into China, probably up into Russia, depending on how they are working with the Russians at this point. But when you zoom out, just really like look at the geographical area, and this is just this one little data leak. I'm assuming it's got to be significantly larger than this. So, you know, I try to end with a human element of it. While this was all really neat to kind of look at from a technical perspective, the human element of being able, these people are being locked up, put in work camps in Tibet, Mongolia. The Uyghurs are just being compromised and sent away. And these are just some of their names. These people were identified directly in the leaks. Some are dissidents, you know, opposing the Chinese government. Some might just be people that they're watching. Not really sure yet, but it was a pretty interesting data dump. We spent way too much time looking at it, but I found it quite interesting, and that's all I've got here. So thanks, everybody. Now Jeff is on Zoom, so hopefully you can.
All right, I'm good. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Sims. I'm a gain of function engineer with a company called WraithWatch. A lot of my public research the last year and a half has revolved around fusing artificial intelligence and data science with offensive systems. And I'm going to discuss how that relates to the ISOON week. Well, if I can get the slide to turn. Let's see. Here we go. Boom. Okay, so ISOON. I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing and introducing what it is because my colleagues have done a fantastic job doing so. But I am going to drill down on two systems found in the leak, as they were the catalyst for the research that I'm going to present here. The first is that email collection, analysis, assisted decision-making system. And the second is the one that appears to be some type of public opinion control influence system. Specifically, it's the language that connects these two: deep learning, assisted decision-making, relationship analysis. These were the things that really intrigued me. And it's not immediately clear how these technologies are used to facilitate these goals. So I thought it's time to do a hands-on POC and really see what can be done. The other thing that drives my research is the idea of asymmetry between cyber defenders and adversaries. Specifically, what happens is adversaries start rapidly adopting advanced technologies such as AI or data science, and how does that affect the already asymmetrical balance? So, building an AI espionage agent. Inspired by ISOON, I wanted to see what was possible. The core of this project, Red Reaper, it's meant to take in a vast amount of stolen data. Of course, we're simulating that. And it's meant to filter down to the most salient and important pieces of email that align to its objectives, of course, malicious. And then it will operationalize a strategy on how best to exploit that stolen data. Now, aside from writing the POC, there was another really critical aspect to this research project, and that was the Enron email data set. To my knowledge, I think it's the only corporate email data set that's realistic that's out there. And without it, without having that test bed for a project like Red Reaper, the project would remain in the theoretical space. So I'm definitely glad to have a data set to work with like that. We're going to go through 3 examples of the Red Reaper final output, and then we'll walk back and see how Red Reaper arrives at these conclusions. So if you focus on the Reaper himself, on the right will be raw email text that we're simulating stolen email. It is real corporate email, but it isn't stolen. And on the left, we'll have final analyses or operationalized strategy from Red Reaper on how best to utilize this pinpointed communication maliciously. So in this example, we can see that in red, bold, Red Reaper's locked onto a communication, an email talking about an imminent wire transfer of $3 million. And we can look to see how it's advising to operationalize this, which would be the email reveals a potential financial transaction of $3 million, which could be interest to competitors or criminal organizations looking for financial gain. The individuals mentioned, Ben K and Mike, may also be of interest for further targeting and potential exploitation. So, I mean, not a stretch of the imagination here to think of some adversary group or some criminal group has a system, an agent like this that is able to monitor in real time vast amounts of email communication and then just light up and say, hey, imminent wire transfer, here's what I think you should do. Pretty sure we all can think that that would be valuable for a lot of criminal groups. Okay, extortion. This was a really interesting example, specifically this one and a follow-on. So in red, we can see a communication chain between executives actually talking about the potential that they've breached the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Red Reaper analyzes this opportunity as the email suggests that Stephen Keen or the company he represents may have been involved in activities that could potentially violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. This information could be valuable for espionage purposes as it may indicate vulnerabilities or illegal activities that could be exploited or used for blackmail/extortion against Stephen Keen or his company. So again, we can definitely see how this would fit into a criminal organization. But the creativity of the system, Red Reaper, also located in a personal communication within the data set, an individual that was going through a child custody battle. And it created a strategy where you could lean on this individual with data extracted from his case in order to maybe manipulate this individual into doing things that may be beneficial for the adversary. So really interesting, also really scary, but it shows the potential of these type of systems. And the last example, this would not be any kind of espionage AI if indeed it could not find some industrial espionage. In this case, it's located in email, specifically some file attachments that reference GE turbine agreement. And its analysis for this strategy is the email contains attached documents related to business agreements between CRO and GE, which could potentially contain some sensitive commercial information. This information could be valuable for competitors looking to gain an unfair advantage in negotiations or business operations. The documents might also contain detail about specific terms and conditions of the agreements, which could be used for espionage purposes to understand the business strategies and relationships between the companies involved. Additionally, the information could potentially be used to manipulate the stock market if any sensitive or damaging information is discovered. So 3 examples there of final output. Let's see how Red Reaper arrives at these conclusions. So the system is actually 3 layers of data science and automation that are meant to filter down, identify these key communications, and then build strategy around them. You can see denoted by the alligator eye. It's pretty small, but I'll read it out. It starts with a total of 517,402 emails. That's the size of the email set. So pretty big email set to start with. And it uses in this layer named entity recognition and a custom embedding space. So named entity recognition looks for specific entities or types of things in text. But specifically here, we're using a legal entity, or we're looking for entities related to law, with the thinking of if there are business communications that reference legalities, they could be potentially higher value than other communications. One of the problems, though, with this is the model that assesses these entities doesn't provide a confidence score. So we don't actually know how confident the model was in identifying these legal entities. To solve this, we actually built a custom embedding, which we started with a list of terms that define a legal terminology, but also we tailored them to the collection goals of Red Reaper, what we hoped Red Reaper would find in the legal space. Then we created an embedding from this list and found the semantic center of that embedding. We did something similar with the sentences that the entities were found in, created an embedding, got the semantic center, and we were able to compare sentence versus this ideal list, and we got a confidence score. Or you could also think of it as an alignment score to the collection objectives of Red Reaper. So in the next stage, as you saw in ISOON, very heavily focused with relationship analysis and things, Red Reaper wants to map enterprise communications. So you can see the database schema, the bottom left. We have entity, document, and sentence. Entity being the senders and receivers of email, document being the email itself, and sentence is exactly what we were talking about. These sentences that had legal entities identified within them and were also confidence scored or alignment scored towards Red Reaper's goals. Now, we don't want to build a giant graph of the entire data set because this is really counterproductive. We want to be filtering, constantly filtering for more valuable and more valuable information. So what Red Reaper does is it says, okay, all these emails and entities connected to these sentences that I've already scored, I'm setting a baseline threshold. If they're not above this threshold, throw them out. So the remaining get mapped into a giant communication graph. And then after that, Red Reaper wants to find sub-communities or sub-communication clusters within the broader communication or within the communication graph, and then identify key communicators, creators and sharers of this high-value information within these communication clusters. It does this by using graph data science, specifically community detection to detect communities, another algorithm called PageRank, which basically assesses the influence or importance of a node within the graph, and then it calculates the degree, which looks at how connected is a node within its community. Specifically, this community, this example, community 1031, is really interesting. We see a tight communication cluster, and it's identified key players, key communicators, creators and sharers in this group. And of the three, the president of Enron Online, the CEO of Enron America, and the chief operating officer. So really interesting to see how a system like this can map communication patterns that may not be immediately observable, I guess, to the human eye, but you get what I'm saying. So through this would have been one of the high-value communication clusters Red Reaper's identified, and it would pass on to the third level. Okay, stage 3, large language model. At this stage, like we were saying, there's identified subclusters of communicators. The important ones are surfaced to the top. We talked about looking at how connected they were in their community, but there's also another metric Red Reaper uses. It looks at also how many connections they have to what Red Reaper values as high value information. So not just how connected they are, but how connected are they to high value information. And they take the top entities out of each community, and then they say, okay, we want all of your communications. Give us all the things. And Red Reaper will leverage a large language model, specifically Mixtral 8x7b Instruct. And it then assumes the role of a sophisticated state-sponsored adversary with goals similar to like we saw in the examples, espionage, blackmail, extortion, financial crime. And it will assess the information based on these strategic goals. It will also assess, given those goals, does this information represent low, medium, or high value to the operator? And then once it does that, it will actually create a strategic or a operational strategy for how best to exploit this piece of information, as we saw in the examples. After it's done this for these key influencers it's identified, it will requery. Oh, actually, it updates the graph with an analyses node, and then it requeries the graph and says, okay, give me all the emails and all the people related to an analyses node that has at least medium value or higher. And that's how we arrive at the other alligator eye here of 1,305 emails. So we've gone from 500,000 emails ranging in diversity from spam to personal communications to stock tips to prized corporate communications, all the way down to 1,305 high value communications as defined by Red Reaper, and all with their operationalized strategy and how to exploit them and who's related to them and who's communicating. So this same technology can actually be used for defense or similar technology. Actually, my hope was to release an open source tool here, but I got a little delayed, life, and it's coming. But I wanted to introduce it a little bit, at least the concepts. So thinking of ISOON, right? Joe mentioned that it was, a lot of disparate images and things. And for an analyst just to start jumping in, imagine you had an agent jump into the data set ahead of you and be able to pull out themes and look at these themes and create hypotheses on what they mean, and then be able to weight or score one theme over another and say, hey, this one's more important than this one according to the data set. And that's what we built here, a cyber threat intelligence analysis agent, or the start of one. It's small POC. And it first looks at, its first layer is something called TF-IDF, term frequency inverse document frequency, which is a simple NLP algorithm that looks at how frequent a term exists in this document versus how rare is it across the rest of the document corpus. And just like Red Reaper, we are able to build a graph of this. So we take document and its top TF-IDF terms. We start creating a graph and looking at intersections between documents who share these top TF-IDF terms. And we're able to, again, run community detection. But in this case, we're hoping these communities are not communicators, but they're actually groupings of top terms or themes or concepts. And we can actually run PageRank as an aggregate across this community and look at the terms together, all the constituents, sum up their PageRank, and this will give us a rating of, or a weighting of importance for that entire community or grouping of terms versus other communities of terms. And similarly, we'll then investigate within each community of terms and look at the PageRank per term, because now we can want to see how important is each term within its own community. And we'll rate those and we'll sort them in descending order so we can get the top terms in the top communities. And hopefully we're going to surface some themes within the data set. So just like Red Reaper, we can use our trusty Mixtral 8x7B and say, okay, hey, listen, we got these groups of terms. And we want you to take a look to see if there's any concepts or underlying themes that these terms might represent. Don't feel you have to make stuff up. You can say yes or no. If there's none there, say no. Trust me, we would rather you say no than just make it up. Something interesting we added here is the last line, trying to find specific concepts or themes like open heart surgery or auto theft, rather than broad categories like healthcare or automotive. This seemed to really put the model in the right mental space to get detailed and creative enough to really be of value and create hypotheses that would be useful for an analyst to start to understand and say, yeah, that's important to me. I'm going to drill down there. Rather than it say, oh, this is IT and networking versus this is network penetration testing. And the CTAI agent results. It identified, I think, about 37 communities, some no theme found, but 2 of these were actually quite relevant to this talk. Community 2001, Its top terms are analysis, email, data intelligence, application layer, decision make, number storage, sourceful, and cloud create statistic. Now, to a human, it might be a little harder to discern. I can kind of see a little bit, but to the LLM, it really hits a bang-on job. So its analysis is, yes, the words listed above could represent the concept of data analysis and decision-making using technology and cloud services, including the process of gathering data from various sources, storing it, analyzing it, and using it to make informed decisions, potentially with the aid of artificial intelligence and application software. Total importance, 59.55 to the data set. Well, that definitely is a central theme in this data set with the email collection and analysis system. It's actually the theme that Red Reaper was built on. So I think it did a good job there. And the other example here, Community 986, its top words are control, account, public opinion, deployment, parameter, mode, guidance, group, domain, applicable, monitor, center, tweet, advantage. And its analysis is the words in the list could represent the concept of the monitoring and control of public opinion or discourse, particularly in a digital context with a focus on parameters, modes, and guidance, and the potential advantages and application of such a system. This concept could involve social media platforms like Twitter, centers for data analysis, and the use of parameters to control and monitor public opinion or discourse within a specific domain or group. So I blasted through a lot here in this short period. High level, there's probably a lot of depth here. I make a lot of research available on LinkedIn, so hit me up on LinkedIn. There's some papers, blogs, things like that. And I hope that you found this talk informative. And I'm thinking maybe Joe will close it off. There he is.
I'm back here. Thanks a lot. So this is our IOC list. There are a lot in there. There are domains listed. A lot of research docs on these lower links as well of other people that have dug into ISOON and dug into some of the related groups that work with them. So this talk will be made available. The video I've already shared the link live on LinkedIn, but the recording will be made available. And as soon as Jeff finishes up this software, this agent software, he'll be making that available to you for free as well. So yeah, trying to provide a lot of value for you guys, and hopefully you can go down these rabbit holes as well and discover what these people are up to and what our adversaries are. So thanks for attending. Thanks for listening. And awesome. Jeff, see you, man.
Yeah, see you. Great job, guys. Al Mitchell, great job too.
Likewise. He can hear.
Yeah.
He's in the corner here.
Okay. Mitchell, good job, buddy. Thanks,
guys.
Joe. Awesome job, man.